kindergarten and first grade have, I guess it is once a week, they have a reading day where they go and somebody, a special guest, reads a book to them, and then they can go to the library, our church library. They get to check a book out and keep it, and read it. And so I was the special guest, and I have to tell you something. I don't mind speaking to the crowds and everything, but I'm a nervous wreck when you put me in a room with a bunch of little kids, and they all came out and they're sitting there, and it was horrible. I was horrible. Those poor little kids, they were sweet as they could be, and they're just sharp as they could be, and we had fun and asked questions. But I tell you, I'd picked a book that I was familiar with. We used it with our little girl and years ago, called A Tale of Three Trees, and it's perfect for kids. And it's been a long time since I read it, but it's a quick book, and I read through it, this morning before I went at 9:30 with the K-5 kids. And they all come out in the Welcome Center, and they have spots that they sit on, and they're the teachers and the helpers. So it came time, and I sat down in the chair to teach them. And I've got the book open, so I'm trying to read it, and I got the wrong glasses. And I made up a bunch of A Tale of Three Trees. I got the story right, but there was a lot of preacher in there, So when they finished, they asked some questions, and they went to get their books, and then they said, "Pastor, you got 15 minutes, and then the first graders come in, and you can, you do it first grader." I said, "I'm going to get my other glasses." And I did. And I got most of it right the next time. But I tell you, I just don't know if I'm going to do that again. But we had fun. One other little kid story. My grandson, my oldest one, called me. He goes 2 days a week to a little school, half-day school at their church. And he called me yesterday, FaceTimed me when he got home yesterday. He said, "Pops, guess what happened today?" And I said, "Well, Bodie, what happened today?" He said, "I was running and my pants fell off." And his mom, of course, is there. I said, "Is that really?" She said, "Yep, all the way down to his ankles." And she was there. He was running to her, and they fell off. She said he had his pull-ups on, but his pants dropped all the way to his ankles. And she said they evidently, when he went to the potty, they didn't retie the drawstring. And so when he starts running, they just fell off. But here's the difference, little boy at 3 years old thinks that's cool. I was running, my pants fell off, So, at any rate. Well, take your Bibles and open up to the book of Acts, chapter 17. I'll read a verse to you in just a moment and reference another chapter as time permits. If not, we'll discuss some of this next week. I want to talk with you, and this fits the context of what we're talking about in light of prophecy and what to anticipate as it relates to to eschatology and the last days. And what culminates? What are we going to be seeing? And part of that involves, listen, the collapse of nations. Did you know that? Part of what we will see at the end of the age, before Christ returns, is the collapse of nations. And why is that of interest to us? Because of either America not being in prophecy or not good in prophecy. Does that make sense? So the collapse of nations. Remember, we've talked about Ezekiel 38, 39, and the likely scenario of how that war will be provoked, and the fact that I think it is safe to say America will not come to the aid of Israel. That's tragic, and that'll be tragic for America, I believe, in the long run. I've talked to you over the years about my belief that America, if she is in prophecy, and I think there is a possibility, a very strong possibility, she is, but it's not good. I think America fits the model of Mystery Babylon that is referred to in Revelation chapter 18. And I taught on that, so I'm not going to go into all of that. If she is not Mystery Babylon, and in those sessions I even said that I believe Mystery Babylon is not only America, but maybe as specific as New York City. It fits the description of the Bible so perfectly. And have you noticed that every time there's been a major terrorist attack in America, and we've had several, they've concentrated on New York City. Do you know why that is? Because New York City is considered the economic capital of the world. And I didn't say it's the largest city. It is one of the largest cities, but it is considered the heart of the economy of the globe. And so that's why terrorists have attacked it, to take that sort of thing down. So I think because of the rise and fall of nations, as history has shown us, as the Bible speaks of, and the potential for where America is in that, makes what's going on right now in the world, it causes us to keep our antennas up, because there's there are national dynamics. China is watching what's going on. The North Koreans announced that they launched an intercontinental ballistic missile last week, I believe it was, with the capabilities of striking America. By the way, the South Koreans said they completely dismissed that as nothing more than propaganda on the part of the North Koreans. Who knows? But what we see again is the nations are in turmoil, aren't they? Mr. Putin continues his aggression in the Ukraine. There was some hope, right? It looked like maybe they were getting close to talking about a ceasefire and that sort of thing. I think that's buying time. I don't think he has any intentions of backing off or backing out of the Ukraine. He has doubled up his efforts now in the eastern corridor, and we may see him leave the western side of it and just say, this is really all we were trying to get in the first place, that which was already controlled by Russian operatives. They already controlled those areas, though they were a part of the Ukraine. So that wouldn't surprise me there. But again, as we've said in the last few weeks, all of it represents somewhere at some point in time, Russia setting itself up with the coalition of other nations to be able to invade Israel. When that happens, that will have global implications. And those global implications, by the way, will probably reflect a lack of protection by America, the UK, and some of these places who will scold the invaders but will do nothing about it. But again, God will step in. God will handle that. That's the war we've been talking about. And then on the heels of that, I told you the Antichrist will rise. That's what I believe. I listened to, by the way, I was sent this. My wife sent me a preacher. She likes other preachers. And she sent me this message by another preacher. But really she did, because she's been watching and listening to what we've been talking about. She already knows. I preach to her sometimes. And she said, you got to listen to this. So I listened to it. And after I listened to it, I told her, I said, you could have put my talk of the past 3 weeks up against his talk, and it's almost verbatim. With the exception of we differ on the timing of the rapture. But otherwise, I said, you could have put our talks right beside the scenario, even the rise of the Antichrist. By the way, if we keep going here and we keep dodging Hebrews, we will talk about the rise of the Antichrist. Looking through some of my studies, and I thought that would be appropriate based on the war from Ezekiel 38 and 39. So, America is problematic for us. In his farewell address in September of 1796, George Washington offered, listen, 1796, George Washington offered a warning to his fellow countrymen. This is what he said, and I quote, "And let us with caution indulge the supposition that morality can be maintained without religion. Whatever may be conceded to the influence of refined education on minds of peculiar structure, reason, and experience, both forbid us to expect that national morality can prevail with the exclusion of religious principle. I was in a Zoom call meeting with one of the leaders of our convention this past week, and he referenced an article. I went and got the article. He and I were in college together, and I referenced an article, and I went and read that article that he had written for one of the major national news magazines, a conservative news magazine. And in the article, he said what's going on in America, in particular with the gender confusion, he says no nation can survive what's happening in America right now. No nation can survive. I've said it in different terms, but he's talking about that in particular. People read my column this coming Sunday. I asked y'all last week, y'all reading my column? Okay, that's 3 of you again. You get it on Thursday if you get it through email. But in my column, I talk about the importance of the academy, the academic institute, and why Ridgecrest got into this. By the way, it was always, from the colonial period forward, the church was responsible more than any other entity for educating the next generations. As late as 1860, there were only 300 public schools, while there were over 6,000 Christian academies in America. And what happened is the church gave up the public square, and secularism rushed in. And now these years later, we're living with the results of that sort of thing, which is why there's so much emphasis on teaching kids 5 years and younger about gender neutrality and all of this stuff. I don't know if you watched any of the confirmation hearings of the recent Ketanji Brown Jackson. Marsha Blackburn asked her a question. Did y'all see this? Senator Marsha Blackburn asked her a question and said, Judge Jackson, can you define the word woman for us? There was an uncomfortable pause. And then she said, no, but I'm not a biologist. And by the way, what in the world does that? Are you a woman? Now that was political correctness on display. That's what that was. No, I cannot. I cannot answer that question. You read my column. I'm giving you my column. But at any rate, she said she could not because she's not a biologist. By the way, just a footnote since you're still asking. The fact that she made that statement is an admission that a biologist and science can determine that. I'm not a biologist. If I were a biologist, I could do it. But we're being told today biology can no longer make that decision. Are you following what I'm saying? By making that statement, that's an actual admission that biology can, but I can't. But we're now told, and by the way, isn't it interesting? We're being told today about everything, follow the science, until it comes to something that's not politically correct, and then suddenly we throw the science out the window. So biology is science until it goes against the grain of a progressive agenda. And then it's no longer science, it's speculation. But if it comes to pandemic, follow the science. That's what we're told. Right? Are y'all following me? Now, all of that points to disaster in America. When you can no longer define a man from a woman, which has been proven in the Ivy League swimming contest. right? Have y'all watched that? You followed that? You got this big hulking guy. He is a guy biologically. Did you see the picture? These other ladies are like this, and he's up here like, you are watching the destruction of a culture that will not take a position on anything that would put them in a posture to have to say something that they may be criticized for. The progressive agenda is cult-like. That's my opinion, which makes it right. But here's what they would just simply say in return. No, religion. Remember what Karl Marx said about religion? It is the opiate of the people. It's their drug, which is why we got to get rid of it. By the way, the progressive mindset today, this isn't in my notes. The progressive mindset today is Marxist. Fully. And many of those who are progressing, are pushing it, have admitted to that. That it's Marxist. It's a different approach. It is win the culture by intimidation. Marx and Stalin and Lenin, they just murdered you. We're going to take over ideologically because we're going to murder everybody who... Don't ever think it couldn't happen in America. But so the tact is different, the outcome is the same, and even the goal is the same. Marxism and socialism. One day I ought to preach a message on socialism. Because this culture and our young people do not understand what's happening. And when they finally get it, they will be living with it, and it'll be too late. So, yeah. Ask her what? No, Black Redemption. But read my column. There were some good. By the way, she said, "Well, would you agree?" Senator Blackburn said, "Would you agree with the statement made by former Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, not known for conservative opinions, who said that it is clearly obvious that there is a distinction between men and women." This is the person she's replacing. And she said, and so Blackburn said, "Would you agree with her statement?" And she said, "No." She said, I can't agree with her statement because I'm not aware of the case in which she referenced it. What difference does that make? The statement is either true or not true, right? So what difference does it make? Well, okay, I've just about given you my whole column, but but at any rate, I say that to say, as a good setup for some of what we'll talk about. We're not going to get through this one tonight. Is that America is in trouble. I mean, more so than ever before. America no longer has any boundaries. There are no moral boundaries. There are no distinctives that made, and that's why we're in education. That's why we're getting into education, is because, by the way, did you know moral values affect math and sciences and history? Recently, progressives came out about a year ago and said mathematics needs to be redone because it's racist. Math is racist. It's bizarre. I mean, it's bizarrely stupid stuff that's being said. And you know what? Nobody will stand up and say the emperor has no clothes. That's what's going on. And so nobody wants to stand up and say, folks, I'll tell you what this is. This is stupid. Well, so what they would say, I'm sorry, you got me on a different track, but what they would say is, we're a cult. That we're the cult, and consequently, we're the problem. That's what is said. Listen, in the years to come, that's going to become more and more a reality for the church in America if the church stands for anything. The church that will, Martin Neymour. Y'all know who he was? He's a German theologian. He was a contemporary of Dietrich Bonhoeffer. You've heard me talk about Bonhoeffer. If you go read a biography on Bonhoeffer, a great German theologian, he had the gall to stand up to Hitler. He was a great leader in the German church, and he said, what's happening is not right. And he stood up to Hitler. Well, long and short, he was thrown into prison. And 10 days before World War II ended, and he was in prison for a good part of World War II, but 10 days before it ended, Hitler had him taken out and hanged, just out of spite. Hitler already knew the war was over. But he spoke out. Well, Neymour, back to Martin Neymour. Neymour did not speak out until much later in the process, and was jailed, but he was not executed. But here's this great line, and I'm going to butcher it, but just you'll get the gist of it. After the war was over, Neymour said, when they came for the Poles, the Polish people, I didn't speak up because I wasn't a Pole. When they came for the Jews, I didn't speak up because I wasn't a Jew. When they came for the working party, I didn't speak up because I wasn't a part of the working party. When they came for, you name it, I didn't speak up for the song. And then he said, and then when they came for me, there was no one left to speak up. In other words, they came to get those of us who were leaders in the church, which, by the way, Hitler told the leaders in the church, you run the church, we'll run the nation, and we'll have this beautiful, and he didn't mean it at all. And he eventually dismantled the church and those. My point is, we're not as far away from that stuff, if you listen, pay attention, in the next decade, if God should tarry and we even thrive on any level. That's why the church is more important than it's ever been before, but can't stick its head in the ground. We can't stick our head in the ground. Let me just, I ain't even got my notes. We got 5 minutes left. Let's read the text and let me get back to you. And then are y'all okay if we come back to this next week? All right, listen. Acts chapter 17. Paul is addressing the philosophers of the age who had this conclave. They would meet on a mountain, a little hill really, right below the Acropolis in Greece, in Athens. I've been there. I've been to both of these. I've been where this happens. I've stood where they tell us this took place. It's right below the Acropolis, an incredible a place where they went and worshiped among all kinds of things. But there's this group of philosophers there, and Paul is addressing them. Look what he says. I'm in verse 22. So Paul, standing in the midst of the Areopagus, said, men of Athens, I perceive that in every way you're very religious. For as I passed along and observed the objects of your worship, I found also an altar with this inscription, to the unknown God. What therefore you worship as unknown, this I proclaim to you. The God who made the world and everything in it, being Lord of heaven and earth, does not live in temples made by man. Nor is he served by human hands, as though he needed anything, since he himself gives to all mankind life and breath and everything. And here's the operative verse. Look at this. And he made from one man every nation of mankind. By the way, that's Paul's confession. Have you ever heard people say, well, Adam and Eve are myths? Paul just said they were real people right there. Because Paul just said, and God made from one man every nation of mankind to live on all the face of the earth, having determined allotted periods. That's historical duration. Having determined allotted periods and the boundaries of their dwelling place. You get that? So every nation, he says, God has determined allotted periods for their existence. And by the way, I think they can determine some of that. I think he's given us the ability, like Nineveh got to extend their life as a nation. And so keep that in mind. I'm going to come back to that more specifically next week. But let me just kind of wrap some things up by talking to you as it relates to rise and fall of nations, because that is a part of the end times structure. Each of the great civilizations in the world have passed through a series of stages from their birth to their decline and eventually their death. And historians have listed these stages. There are 10 of them. I'm going to give them to you. The first stage moves from bondage to spiritual faith. A nation breaks. Think about America. We came here for freedom, but we found ourselves under bondage of the British Empire, right? In fact, that's what started it. They were enforcing laws and tariffs on us beyond our ability to meet the need. And so consequently, our nation was born with a spiritual kind of faith, but we started under this kind of repression. Number two, the second stage, from spiritual faith to great courage. So they become our early foundings were deeply spiritual, okay? But from second stage, from spiritual faith to great courage. The third stage moves from great courage to liberty. The fourth stage moves from liberty to abundance. The fifth stage moves from abundance to selfishness. The sixth stage moves from selfishness to complacency. The seventh stage moves from complacency to apathy. The eighth stage moves from apathy to moral decay. The ninth stage moves from moral decay to dependence. The government. And the 10th stage and last stage moves from dependence back to bondage. This is, historians tell us, this is the progression of nations from their birth to their death. Jim Nelson Black, in his book, When Nations Die, researched the decadence in modern society, and he listed the signs of decay. Here they are, the signs of decay in a nation. Luxury, skepticism, weariness, superstition, a preoccupation with self, promotion of the wrong people, the urge to overspend, and a rise of liberal opinion. That is, the popularization of attitudes and policies controlled by sentiment rather than sound moral judgment. Now, folks, that's where we are. That's where we are right now. Nations rise and fall. That's a fact. Every nation has followed this progression. They started in bondage, they ended in bondage. And the Bible tells us and teaches us, people, that in the last days there will be global upheaval among the nations of the world. There will be chaos, war, economic issues, socialistic pressure, and these will eventually lead to the convergence of nations under one leader. You know who that is. Sovereignty will not exist as we know it. Now, I don't know, I mentioned it last week, but there are well-known industrialist, technocrats, and even government officials that meet annually, and one of the agendas is to how to create in America, in the nations around the world, what is called a Great Reset. They've taken advantage of the pandemic. They've even admitted the pandemic has given them opportunity to rearrange the social order to a more globalist, a more world order. You even heard the president about 2 weeks ago say, this is the right time for a new world order. And then when they do that and people say, whoa, 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 they say, oh, whoa, 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 they back off. They back up. Folks, that is a real agenda. In fact, I've got a book called The Great Reset by one of the leaders of the World Economic Forum, who is pushing this among these leaders that I just talked about, pushing this agenda. And so I got the book to read it. And it essentially is a massive form of communism, Marxism across the globe, maintained under this elite umbrella of these leaders, these world leaders and technocrats, called The Great Reset. Klaus, who? That's it. Klaus Schwab, who heads up the World Economic Forum. And he published the book. This isn't somebody writing one about it, though there are some about it. This is his book. I read his book because I thought before I read somebody else's take on his book, I'm going to read his book. And so this is emerging. That's what there are some who believe. I'm not yet in that camp. There's some who believe all of these things right now are a part of that Great Reset. I simply think those who are interested in the Great Reset look for opportunities to advance it. Not necessarily are they saying we've caused all of this in order, but since these things are happening, this is a perfect time to recreate the social order of the globe and the economic order of the globe. By the way, there are many around the globe, world leaders, particularly Russia and China, who would like to reset the world currency and take it away from the American dollar. That's a part of this agenda, is that we need a global currency. Isn't that interesting, given what the Bible teaches? And we need a global currency. We need a new world order. And we need to move the balance of power away from America. Well, I got to stop. But we'll pick back up next week. I didn't even get into my major points. So we'll pick back up here next week. Do you have any questions before we go? Can you get my notes? I did go pretty fast, didn't I? I tell you what, I'm a part of a great financial reset. For $15, you can have my notes. No, I'm teasing you. I'll see, Linda, if I can get my secretary to kind of peel them out of here. And some of the stuff is my talking points that you wouldn't really. The 10 things? Yeah. I'll try to get her to pull some of those things that I talked about tonight out, and maybe even what I hope to talk about next week. Are y'all okay continuing this? Okay. All right. So we'll keep talking about this. Hebrews, we'll get to you soon. Okay?